My name's Hannah and I live in Wolverhampton. I was born in Wolverhampton and I've gone to school there, primary school, high school. Primary school and high school for me weren't the best of times, so to say. They weren't, enjoyable. I don't really have good memories from there. My family, I still live with my family, still with my parents and my sister, and all my family's quite close. All my grandparents and my aunties, all my cousins are all really, really close to us and everything. So I've grown up in quite a family-orientated environment, so to say. And they're all Christians, really strict Christians. We're made to go to church every Sunday, Christmas, Easter, you name it. We had to be at church. We weren't really given a choice on that. And I've always, I suppose from leaving school at the age of 15, I've always believed in a God. That's never been a doubt to me. But to me, what I didn't necessarily believe in when I was going to church was the Trinity, which is, Jesus Christ being the Son of God. It never really made sense to me. So that's sort of where my journey begins from that age up until now. For me, always from primary school and high school, my sister was the popular one and I was always supposedly the one that was left behind. There's only a year between me and my sister. So for me, school, I never had friends. I never left primary school with friends and I never left high school from friends. And I was always bullied in school as well. This later on did lead to quite severe consequences. But alhamdulillah, I've got through that now, and so I don't look back on school as enjoyable at all, not at all. And I don't carry any friends from there, any contacts at all whatsoever. I think with me as well, because of the school I went to, because it was so small, like the population wasn't that great where I went to school in. And also as well, in the area that I live, there's no multicultural people. Were all white, were all Christians. That was it. There was no Asians, there was no Indians, nothing. So that's the sort of background I come from. And yeah, I was always bullied at school, always. And it never got easier, because when I left school at 15, I went straight into work. And 2 years being at that job, I actually left because of the work harassment that I was under. And I think as a build-up from school, as a build-up from work, I did eventually become suicidal, and I have tried to take my life on more occasions than I can imagine. And that is all from being bullied at school, having work harassment, and it's never really stopped, to be quite honest. But since taking my shahada, alhamdulillah, I've not been in that situation. I know that I've been forgiven for my past. I don't have these problems anymore, and for some reason, my life has got better since I've taken my shahada, which, alhamdulillah, is definitely a blessing. But before that, it was day after day, it was just an absolute struggle for me just to even think about getting out the door some days, because I knew exactly what I was going to face. I never told anybody about it. I think when you're at that age and that's what you're going through, because in schools nowadays, when you're being bullied, the first thing they tell you or the first thing they teach you is go and tell somebody. But when you're at that age, you're so confused about why it's happening, and you just get to a point when you don't want anybody to know, because you just think, oh, it's because of me, it's because of the way I am, it's because of the way I think, it's because of the way I do. That is the emotional state that you get in when you're bullied. I mean, I was lucky because mine was more emotional bullying than physical. So I know there is kids out there that get physical bullying, which obviously is a lot worse. But it doesn't do any good nowadays saying to a child who's being bullied, go and tell somebody, because they never will. Because at that age, you're so naive to everything that goes on, and you always think, oh, right, okay, I'm being bullied, therefore it must be my fault. It must be because I'm doing something wrong. So why do I need to go and tell somebody? It's obviously a change that I need to make. I mean, looking back now, it isn't. As I always say, the people who bully are the people that've got their own problems. That's why they bully, because they've got their own problems and they can't deal with it, so they pick on other people. That's what a bully is. And, I've come through it, and I can safely say now that I've got through it with the absolute most blessings of God, with Allah, because I wouldn't have got through it without it. Being at that point in your life, being that low when you want to take your life, it's nothing you can really say to anybody. There's nothing, you can't describe your feelings. You can't say, yeah, I've tried to do it because of this. It's a build up of everything. that happens. Because when I left school, I thought, right, that was it, I'm free, I'm not going to face this anymore. I was that naive when I left school. I was like, no, it's fine, I don't have to speak to these people anymore, I don't have to contact them, I don't have to go back to that school. I got a job and thought everything would be okay, and it wasn't. But that's just something that happens sometimes in life. My general family life is okay. I mean, as I say, my sister was always the one that was like centre of attention in every situation, even in our home life, because she was popular at school, she was getting good grades, she knew she was going to leave school, go to college, go to uni, get a degree. So my family life generally, yes, it was good. I had a very, very good upbringing. I was very well looked after, loved and cared for, like I still am. But I think my family are they look to us and they want us to be, they want their daughters to be, have this degree and that degree. They want us to have good jobs. They don't really want necessarily the out route, which is leaving school, going straight to work. They don't really like that. Their mindset is that you should go out there and go to college, go to uni and get the best education that you can get before going to work. So when I left school and told them that, yes, I'm still going to study, but I'd rather work, it wasn't the easiest things to tell them, because I think because of how they've been brought up, how my mum and dad were brought up, they wanted that to follow on. And I knew that just from the way my grandparents were with me and my sister generally in our home life. They wanted that family tradition to be passed down, so to say, believe in your religion, go to church every Sunday, get good education, get good jobs. That was their mindset, and that still is their mindset. And even to this day, they don't know that I was suicidal. They don't know that I tried to take my life. To this day, they don't even know about the bullying. I'm 21 now, and I don't really want to tell them. It's not something I really want to discuss with them, because I don't want them to blame themselves for it. I don't want them to think it was their fault. So no, to this day, they don't know about it at all. For me, when I left school, I always had in my mind, I was like, if I go into college or if I go into uni, it's like, it is a school environment. So I always avoided it because I didn't want to be bullied again. So that's why I immediately went, right, now I'm going straight to work. I still studied it, but I did it as apprenticeships. So I'm still, studied and qualified as everybody else. But that was my mindset at that time, that if I go to college, if I go to uni, I'm going back into the school environment. I'm going back around people. It's all that being around people, being around friends that just absolutely frightened me. Because I knew that I always knew that it would continue, because at that time, in my head, I was being bullied because of who I am, what I do, etc., etc., etc. So going into further education that way, then that's always going to continue. I knew I had to go into work to change myself, to be a better person. So it didn't exactly work out how I planned, because obviously I still had my work harassment, my work bullying. But yeah, at that time, that's what I thought would make it okay, make it better. When I left school, I went into childcare. I work in private day nurseries. I still do that to this day. That's the nature of work that I do. When I started work, I was untowards. There was nothing wrong, or nothing that I picked up on that was wrong. But I think it was about probably 8 months into my job, I started to notice little things. Like, I noticed that they were talking behind my back, but obviously they didn't know I was over-listening to the conversations. And I think being in a childcare environment, being in private day nurseries, it's all women. You don't get any men that work there. And when you're in that environment, loads of women, I think it's a natural thing to have, natural problem to have when you've got 15 women working together day in, day out for like 11 hours a day. But then when I left work, when I actually got, left work in 2009, that's when I really noticed it, because when I left work, all the staff promised me that they'd stay in touch and that we'd carry on our normal out of work lives, still going out, still meeting up. Literally the day I left work, the harassment started. They openly blackmailed me on Facebook for everybody to see. They openly bullied me on Facebook for everybody to see. And this went on for about probably 6 months, even after I'd left my job. They would call me one after another, like on the phone, and I don't know, it was just horrendous. That's what I mean. It was never, my bullying was never physical. It was more emotional and more blackmailing side. But that continued for about 6 months, even after I left my job. And for that 6-month period, that's when I was self-harm, suicidal. I didn't want to know. Like, even when I was at home, I'd shut myself away. You know, I'd lock the doors, shut myself away. I never communicated with my family that well, because I just, you know, I got that to that point. I got that low, and I always managed to get away with trying to take my own life, because it's if you ask somebody who's suicidal, they'll always say they never planned it, but they do. When you're suicidal, you plan to take your life, you plan how you're going to do it. So I always planned it when I knew my family would away. I would purposely send my family away. I'd purposely go, oh, there's some tickets for the weekend, off you go, and I'd purposely get them out the house so that I'd have the house on my own. And I did that for about 6 months to a year after I left my job. I think for me, looking back, childcare for me was a way of taking my mind off my situation, because in childcare, obviously, you're looking after other children, you have to care for them, and that's always what I wanted to do anyway. But for me, it was taking my mind off looking after myself. Having somebody else to take care of, having somebody else's problems to deal with, kind of made it easier for me, because it distracted me from everything that was going on in my life. So that's sort of the main reason why I did childcare. Because for me, that's, you know, I needed that peace of mind, that I needed somebody else. I needed somebody else's problems to deal with. I know it may sound really mad, but it is a way out, and it does help you get your mind off your problems. You don't have to deal with yourself every day, and that little voice in your head with all the negative thoughts every day. So yeah, I know it's a strong word to use, but I hate the people that obviously did the bullying, but I forgive them. I wouldn't hold anything against them at all. No, not at all. I don't blame them. I don't hold anything against them. You know, I just think, looking back now and researching about bullying and looking at other people that have been bullied, as I said, bullies have always got their own problems. That's why they bully other people. So looking back at it, I don't blame them, because I just think, well, they clearly had their own problems. They clearly had their own, mishaps, self-esteem issues, self-image issues on their own, and that's why they had to take it out on somebody else. And I, in a way, not being, I suppose, ignorant or big-headed, but I actually look back and think, what have they, we're 21 now and they're still in college, they haven't got a job, they've never worked a day in their life, half of them still haven't got a decent grade from college or graduated from uni because of certain reasons. I'm 5 years down the line, I've studied, I've worked hard, I'm in a really high up position at work, I've got a decent job, I've got a decent life now. So I just think they clearly did have their own problems. That's how I look back at it. So, because it's not easy to talk about, because the first time I openly admitted about my suicide was when I did my last interview, which was nearly a year ago, but that's the first time I've ever openly talked about it. And the reason why I can do it now without breaking down or getting too tough about it is just because I think, oh, you know what, I've been through it. It was clearly meant to happen. For me, it was clearly meant to be, because if that hadn't happened, where would I be today? Where would my journey? It was part of my journey. That's what I believe, and that's why I think, I've been through it, been there, done that type thing. So yeah, that's how I can talk about it now. But I still would never tell my family, not yet. Not at all. I think the furthest I've ever gone is typical bottle of vodka and tablets. That's probably the furthest I've ever gone. I mean, it never. I never worked, did it? But it did knock me out for a few days. Like, I was unconscious for quite a few days because I had so much of it, so much of the alcohol with the tablets. But that's probably the furthest I've ever gone. Yeah. But I thought about everything. I thought about jumping in front of a train. I thought about jumping off a bridge. I thought about jumping in front of a car on a main road. I thought about everything. I thought of my mum and dad used to have razor blades in the bathroom. And if there's a certain place on your wrist that if you cut, you'll die because of the type of vein and arteries that are there. So I thought about that. I even researched into doing it because I got that low that I did not want to be here anymore. I really couldn't handle anything. I couldn't even, some days, I know I wasn't working, but some days if I had to pop to the shop for my mum, even that in itself wasn't a struggle just to get out the front door. Because when you're in that state, you think that the whole world's against you, and you find every situation to be negative. You always find something bad out of everything that happens in the day. So I think I had about 3 months when I never left the house at all. Never once even opened the front door to somebody. Typical family thing, we had to dress up, go to church on a Sunday. But it wasn't, yeah, we were made to go up until a point. I think it was up until we were about 16. After we were 16, my mum and dad were like, no, right now you're an adult, now you can decide what you do. Up until before the age of 16, we were made to go. There was absolutely no say, no if, no but. If you weren't there, that was it. You were in so much trouble. You were grounded for like 2-3 months. You weren't allowed out the house. It was that strict on us that we had to go. And in a way, because my sister moved away to university, so I'm kind of the one left at home, they still try and make me go. They still try, and even though they know about my conversion now, like my being Islamic and stuff, they still do try and make me go on Christmas and Easter, because they still think, you know, that's how we were brought up. So they've still got it in their heads that, you know, that's where our daughter should be. That's what we should do. I never felt that connection when I went to church. When I went to church, I knew there was a God. I could feel that, and I knew in my heart that there was a God, but I could never settle there. There was an unease in me because I kept questioning this Trinity. I just could not get my head, from about the age of 13, 14, I could not get my head around the Trinity. Because in my mind, okay, if Jesus is the Son of God, then you're basically saying, well, God would have had to live upon this earth. You know, that's, to me, that at that age, there was no way that was possible, and I never really settled. So even though I didn't mind being made to go to church because I knew there was a presence of God, I just wasn't comfortable there because they kept, you know, referring to the Trinity because that's their belief. I mean, to this day, I would never say anybody's wrong in their religion. I would never turn around to a Christian or anybody and say, you're wrong, why, you know, you're going to go to the hellfire because you're following this. I don't do that, because I think at the end of the day, as long as you believe in one God and you're following a straight path to him, then there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has their own belief systems because everybody's an individual. So that is how I review, you know, that's my outlook on religion. And what I keep trying to explain to my family is that, you know, you've got your path to God, I've got mine. At the end of the day, we still believe in God, so there shouldn't be a problem. I've just got a different journey to him. So that's, you know, that's why I don't, like now if they ask me to go to church, I still sometimes go, because for me it's respecting them, it's respecting that path, you know, their path to God. It's still showing that respect and everything, but I just block myself out from everything that they teach because I don't feel settled there, and I haven't done from about the age of 13, 14. I always knew that there wasn't something quite right, and I always knew that I would never be like them. So at the time, obviously, I didn't know anything about Islam, but I just knew that this isn't my path, this isn't where my life is heading. You know, even at that age, my mum and dad used to talk about like our marriage, you know, getting married in that church, walking down the aisle. Again, from that age, I've never ever visualised myself walking down an aisle in a white dress. I've never ever visualised it because I knew it would never happen. Something was telling me that wasn't my path, that wasn't my way of life. So, you know, it wasn't until like a few years later that now I can look back and say, oh, so that's what was going through my mind at that time then. That's what I was trying to be told. When I was suicidal, obviously I'd left my job and I didn't really have... what happened was after... I think I'd been through the worst of my suicide. I woke up one morning and I was like, right, if I can't actually do this, if this isn't actually going to happen, if I can't actually take my life, then I need to start seriously doing something about it. Seriously start doing something about it. And that's when I got up that morning and I thought, right, I need to, first of all, get myself out of the house. If I can't get a job, I need to get some voluntary work. I need to break this ice of getting out of the house and getting back used to being around people and being social and not always thinking that it's my fault because of who I am. I needed to sort of break that out of my system. And from that, I actually became a volunteer at Birmingham Children's Hospital. And there I was a specialised play therapist, so I was looking after families with young children. And then I would sit through, like, if one of the children was having a procedure where they weren't knocked out until they were just having local, I'd have to sit through it and kind of distract the child whilst they were having their procedure done. And from then I met a family, an Asian family, who at that time I didn't know they were Muslims. I just knew they were Asians. I didn't know that their religion was Islam and they were Muslims. But through this family, I had to look after them outside of the hospital as well, so I had to start, like, going to the house and looking after them there. From that situation, I got a job at a nursery that was in a mosque. So with the two combined, I really started to question the religion. I really started to question what they were doing, why they were doing these things, why they went to mosque, what was Islam. From then I started to really, really question it. And that's sort of where my journey begins into taking my Shahada. But yeah, I think that's why I said if I hadn't have been suicidal, I wouldn't have thought to go and get that, that job or that voluntary work. I wouldn't have thought to go into that hospital, meet that family. Everything that happens in your life happens for a reason. So for that time, that was my reason for meeting them. I think the way they did things, so like Eid, for example, like Ramadan Eid, I got really intrigued, like, why did they fast? What was so important that they had to do it? And then when Eid came around, I spent a lot of time with the family at home celebrating their Eid. And I kept thinking, like, there was something about it that just read to me that it was, really, really meant something to me. And I really wanted to know why they were doing it. And I was really intrigued by everything they were doing. I was really intrigued, like, why were they going to the mosque so much? What was that important they had to go that often? Because, yeah, we went to church every Sunday and Christmas and Easter, but they were going to mosque, like, nearly every day. And I was thinking, like, there must be, like, a reason behind this. So, and then obviously when Muharram comes around, I was questioning, like, the martyrdom, why they did it and what their beliefs were with that. So I think I just really started to question everything from then. And I think getting that job as well in the mosque, I got introduced to a lot of Asian families, Muslims, because that's, and again, I just started to question it, because being in that mosque environment, you kept hearing, like, the azan, the call to prayer, and seeing people pray, and I really, really did start to think there's something to this that's reading to me, that's making sense to me. And I think probably about 3 or 4 months after I knew this family, they gave me a Quran as sort of, I don't think they kind of wanted me to become Muslim. I don't think they were trying to force that upon me, but it was, in their eyes, that's a good gift to give to somebody when they've been looking after the family so long. So, and I never looked at this Quran straight away. This Quran probably sat in my room for about 6-7 months, probably about 8 months before I actually thought, no, I need to start looking at this. I need to start reading it, because I know my Bible from back to front. And when I started reading the Quran, I just couldn't believe how similar it was to the Bible. It wasn't like something completely new to me. It was that similar that I was like, right, now I need to seriously start thinking about this and making this decision, because everything about it was just made me happy. It read to me and it made me so peaceful inside. In those 6 to 8 months, that's obviously when I made that transition from going from the hospital, doing the voluntary work, to starting work within the nursery in the mosque. So in that 6 to 8 months, that's when I started to question the family, question people at the mosque, question my parents, question my staff, question my managers. Because being in that mosque, you are around everything that they do every day, every celebration and every prayer and all these on. So that was that period, in that 6 to 8 months. That's when I was, really started to think about why they're doing things, asking why they're doing things, and finding out a bit more about the religion itself.
Well, you were being told by the people about Islam. Was it making sense to you?
Yeah.
And why were you going back to your parents?
It was making, everything they said to me just made sense, because in a way the Bible is very, very similar to the Quran. As I describe it, if you're in a situation where something's happening, and you later ask two people what happened in that situation, they'll say different things, but they're talking about the same thing that happened. And that is exactly how I describe the Bible and the Quran, because all the stories are exactly the same. Everything that's told is exactly the same. It's just told from a different viewpoint. And that's why when I did finally read the Quran, it just made complete and utter sense to me. I just thought, when I was reading it, I was like, you know what, this is where I'm meant to be. This is exactly, to me, this is the truth, this is peace, this is beauty, to me, the Quran. That is exactly how I viewed it. Because for me, the Bible isn't wrong, but obviously it always goes back to the point of this Jesus being the Son of God. Every page, it goes back to that. Every story that's told, it goes back to that. And I just didn't necessarily, adjust to that very well. I didn't want to be reminded every day that Jesus is the Son of God, because I was like, no, it doesn't make sense. It's not it's not logistical or anything like that. So when I got that Quran and I did eventually start reading it, that's when I knew for sure that this is what I wanted to do. And even before I took my Shahada, I was doing Ramadan, I was fasting, I was doing Eids, I was doing Muharram, I did everything before I even actually took my Shahada. Because I think for me, it made that much sense when I read the Quran. I knew that that's what I wanted to do straight away. And I was like, no one's stopping me. This is what I want, so that's what I'm doing. And the day that I took my Shahada, I started wearing hijab. I've never once even questioned it or doubted it at all. From the first minute that I took my Shahada, that was it. For me, it wasn't, I didn't fear anybody. I knew that I would get negative comments, I knew that I would get looks, I knew that people might look down on me and things like that, but it never ever bothered me. Because for me, I knew that this was right. I knew that this is who I am, this is what I wanted to follow. And it's so meant so much to me, it's so peaceful to me, that everything just after taking my Shahada for me slotted into place.
Yeah, so this is my friend Snowba, and we've known each other for about a year and a half now. We met through a camp that I went to in December at a mosque in Peterborough. We kind of stayed there over Christmas, over New Year, and that's how we got to know each other from there.
I didn't really know. Do you remember? I didn't know her. What happened was, because we stayed overnight for 3 nights, and because it's Muharram, we were in the same room. Now, luckily enough, I don't know how, she slept right next to me. So we were on the floor, and I lay down here, and then she was laying down. And I didn't know she was a convert. I didn't know anything about you at all. All I knew was she was English. Because one of the girls, do you remember my friend? She asked you as well. And then she said something about Allah and how she loves being here. And then I was like, okay, I don't understand. I fell asleep.
Yeah.
You know, the next day we were praying in Jama'ah, and she happens to be right next to me. So we were praying, and I said to her, are you a traveller? She said, yes, she is. So where are you from? Wolverhampton. I said, I'm from Luton. And I said, okay, you have to do the traveller prayer, don't do the full prayer. I said, follow me. So
do you remember that though? Because I didn't know how to pray at that time. I was
she didn't know anything about how to pray. And I said to her, follow me. And we did 2 rakat and we finished. And I said to her, so I asked her something about namaz, and she said, no, I only know Allahu Akbar. I was like, no. I said, do you even know Allahu Akbar? She said, no. I said, how are you praying? Oh, it's my intention, isn't it? Oh, it's like, subhanAllah. I looked at her and I was just like shocked, because there's Muslims out there nowadays, they don't pray, they don't have no importance to prayer, and there's somebody who's new to Islam, doesn't know anything about religion, and she's standing there praying. Subhanallah, I was like amazed. Then Hannah was stayed with me. Do you remember when we went to that lecture? You were walking with me. I thought, okay, she sat next to me. We watched the lecture, and then we started eating. We were eating together, and she said something about she wanted to do research in Shia Islam. And I said to her, okay, that's fine. And I was thinking, there's an alim our resident alim at that time. Do you remember Sheikh Hamid Bakar?
Yeah.
I said to her, look, somebody you can relate to. He's an American convert as well. He was Christian before. And come to my place. I invited her. It's like a week later, 2 weeks later, she comes down, driving all the way from Wolverhampton. And I said to her, let's go there. Made an appointment with Sheikh Hamid. We went inside. She started asking questions. Do you remember it was about Matam?
It was everything about Shia Islam, what they believed, and what the belief system was, why were they different to Sunnis. I asked quite a lot of questions, didn't I?
Yeah, it was. And then I said, then she was saying that, do you remember when you were saying that you want to speak to Sunnis? And I said to her, go, Bismillah, go, have a look at that. It can open your mind. Have a look at Sunnism and Shiism. I recommend you go. So she went and she spoke to them, and we got quite very, very close, because she stayed with me one night, 2 nights, and we've had like similar experiences. I've had quite a difficult life as well in that sense, and it's made me stronger in my faith too. And then we just clicked, we just became very close friends. We're like best friends now. But and then after she spoke to him, we went back. She went to other Sunni sisters and Sunni mosque, and she says, no, but it doesn't make sense to me. I said, okay, fine. Do you remember I wanted you to go. I said, go have a look, open your mind, choose your path, whatever path you take. That's your choice. So then she, and then after that we stayed in contact. She was continuously doing research, having a look at both sides, and she said, no, but you know what, I want to go into Shiism. She wasn't entirely sure, but do you remember the Iran trip happened?
Yeah, it was more like 80% before we went to Iran, wasn't it? It was still a little bit. So.
She was still a bit. And then I said to her, there's an Iran trip, and I wanted to go to Iran anyway, because I went once before, about 9 years ago. And I said to her, come, let's go. And she was like, no. She was a bit iffy about going. I don't really want to go. I said, no, don't worry, I'll be with you if you have any problems, because I was a bit worried, because we went to Al Mustafa International University, do you remember? Yeah. And their level was quite advanced. Do you remember? And you were saying to me, I don't understand what they're saying, and I was worried about that. How am I going to explain to her? Then I thought, no, I can break it down and explain to her when she needs to. And then after Iran, we came back, and she was very much into it. Must have jumped around in Iran, that touched her a lot. Do you remember? You really loved that, especially that.
Didn't want to leave there, did we?
Yeah, and then she came back, and then we were just confirming, and after that, she wanted to go more into Shiism. We met, you have a Shia teacher as well, she's teaching you things. But I've always said to her, look, we have to respect Sunnis and Shias and whatever, because at the end of the day, they're entitled to their belief just as we are entitled to our belief. And it's good to see them, it's not like you can't go to a Sunni mosque, no.
And like I've always said, they're always Muslim anyway, aren't
they're always Muslim, yeah, and I have Sunni family as well. We're like 10% Shia in our family. So then after that, me and Hannah have been in contact, and she's very much into, reading her books, and she was sometimes ask me questions, and she'd ring me 11 o'clock, and I was like to her, if you need to ask me a question, ring me at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's not a problem, I'll pick out and I'll answer your question. So alhamdulillah, so she's more stronger on this path, and now we're like best friends, so we're doing it together, inshallah.
I took my Shahada in October 2011. So it was probably from the time that I started reading the Quran to actually taking my Shahada, it was probably about 5 months, roughly. As I said, I started reading the Quran, and that's when I started to do fasting, Ramadan, and it was after that first Ramadan that I did that I took my Shahada in the October. So yeah, it's probably about 5 months. Roughly. When I took my Shahada, obviously I had the family answering my questions who were Shia, and the mosque that I worked in was Sunni, so I had them answering my questions. And then obviously some of my parents and the children, the staff that I looked at, they were from different castes as well. So for about 3-4 months, I was getting information from everybody. And at that time, I never thought anything about it. But then come the December at Christmas, I realised, that's when I started researching a bit more into Islam and realising that there was different castes in Islam, like there is in every other religion, I was Christian, but even in Christianity, there's Catholics, there's Protestants, all that. So when I started to research into it, that's when I started to realise, hang on, I'm being told different answers to my questions from different people. And that's when I started not to question my religion, but to question who I was my secting and who I was following. So that was quite a sort of interesting time in my life, because I didn't realise that everything I'd learned in that 3-4 months after taking my Shahada wasn't necessarily everything that I needed to be doing or everything I needed to be following. So that's sort of when my test came. What the Shia family were telling me made a lot more sense to me than what other people were telling me. I think for me, the main reason why I became Shia was because of the love that I have for the Ahlul Bayt, and the reason being that the Shias do follow them. I find with Sunnis, they don't acknowledge anything with the Ahlul Bayt. They don't acknowledge anything at all with them. Like as I said, they don't do Muharram, they don't do Martin, they don't do any of that. And the more and more I researched into it, I was like, how could you not follow this? How could you not recognise this love. And it really, really kind of got me angry in a way. The more and more I talked about it, the more and more research into it, it kind of got me more angry, the fact that they didn't do this. So that's when I decided to become Shia and retake my Shahada in that mosque, in the Shia mosque. So I effectively have taken my Shahada twice. It's called Jewels of a Muslim Woman. O Muslim woman, veil is your jewel. In the virtuous institute of hijab, you happily dwell. Hijab is your light and greatest honour. Hijab is a protective shield for women. You are saved from all bad omen. Your status is higher than heavenly hall. You submitted to the will of God. Your virtuous personality is very precious. Prettier than Miss World is your subconscious. Hijab is a shell and you are its real pearl. No Western girl can compete with your jewel, although you live in a very simple attire. Modern fashionable women will envy you when they do retire. They will regret neglecting hijab, having lost the status by not wearing niqab. For surely without hijab, a woman is worthless. By observing hijab, she becomes matchless. I think because I had such a rich source of people, I think because I had that many people to ask, that was my main source of information. Because from these people, I then got contacts to like scholars, sheikhs, all this. So yeah, I've read a few books and I've researched on the internet, but my predominant source of information has come from other people asking questions. My parents knew I was working in the nursery. They knew that I had contact to the mosque and to this family, but they never once even knew that I was doubting my religion or questioning Islam. Not once. For me, it was just, I didn't want them to know at that time. I just thought, well, you know, nothing might actually come out of this, so I just left it. Just never ever told them at all about it. So, or in their heads, you know, still going to church, going to work, being a good girl. That's how they saw it. When I took my Shahada in October, I refused to tell my dad. I don't like confrontation with my dad, so I told my mum when she was on her own, and that was 2 months after I'd taken my Shahada in October. Even though I was wearing my hijab from day one, what I was doing was I was putting it on in the car. I'd sit on my driveway in my car and just put it on and then leave the house, come back, take off in the car, go back in the house, so that they never had that suspicion of what was going on. And even after I told my parents, I did that for quite a long time because they didn't like the concept of hijab. They didn't like the concept of their daughter being covered. To them, it was, you know, the second I said to my mum, I'm taking my Shahada, I've become a Muslim, she basically turned around and said to me, so does that mean you've got contacts with terrorists then? And that is purely because of the media concept, that's what media does, that's what media gives out as Muslims, that's the perception that it gives out. And I think because where we live is so quiet, you know, small population, there's no Asians, there's no Indians, there's no nothing, like everybody's Christian, everybody goes to the same church. It was completely and utterly alienated to them. They had no idea of any other religions, any other cultures. So for me to turn around and say, yeah, I'm Muslim now, just absolutely hit the roof. And it was very, very, for quite a few months after that, it was a real struggle. You know, every day was an argument, every day there was something happening in my house because they just couldn't get used to it. They couldn't understand why I'd taken my Shahada, why I'd become Muslim. And at that point, I couldn't really explain to them, and I still can't really explain to now. Like, if somebody comes up to me and says, oh, so why did you take your Shahada, why did you become Muslim? I can't give the one straight to the point answer, because for me, it's a spiritual feeling that's inside. I know that it's right. I know for me, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to follow, this is what I believe. And that feeling that you get inside, you can't explain it to anybody. When you know, you know. That's as simple as I can put it, but it is definitely an inner feeling of peace and happiness. The second I took my Shahada, I turned around and I said, you know what, I'm home now. That's the first thing I said after I took my Shahada. I was like, my past is gone now. It doesn't matter what's happened to me. It doesn't matter what I've been through. I'm home. This is where I'm meant to be. Because at that time I was sitting in a mosque when I took my Shahada. And I just sat and cried for about 2 hours after taking my Shahada because I was just that happy that I'd done it. I was so happy and I was so like, I'm home, I'm at peace, I haven't got to worry about anything or anybody anymore. I think when they took my shahada, having that feeling of saying I'm home, I was like, you know what, I'm free of everything now. It just felt like a complete and utter weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It just felt like I could breathe for the first time in about 8 years. I didn't have to think about anything or anybody anymore. Just felt like the weight had been lifted. This was a new start for me, and I knew it was going to be a struggle. I knew that I was also going to have a jihad with my family and maybe a couple of other friends, but I didn't care at that time. I was just like, you know what, I've been brought to this path by Allah. This is where I'm meant to be. This is who I'm meant to be. So everything else, all the jihad and everything, can come afterwards. That's second nature to me. That, you know, I'll deal with that later. Right now, I just felt like, you know what, I'm home. I'm at peace. I'm happy. At that time, when I took my shahada, I knew that obviously Muslims wore hijab, and I always looked at hijab. I was always taught that hijab was obligatory. You had to wear it. There was no if or buts. You had to wear it. But for me, it was, I think, because I'd been in that mosque, working in that mosque for quite a long time before I took my shahada, and I was around women that were wearing hijab. I was even around some of my children, even some of my children that were 4 or 5 years old, they were wearing hijab. Their parents would bring them in hijab. So I always viewed hijab as a beauty. I never looked at it as they were made to do it. I never looked at it as a bad thing or a negative thing. I always looked at it as, you know what, they're covering their modesty, they're covering their, and it's such a beautiful thing, the hijab. So for me, when I took my shahada, I was like, no, I've got to start wearing my hijab now, because this is who I am, and I don't need to be like this in front of anybody anymore. You know, I've come home now, this is where I'm meant to be, this is what I knew straight away that that's what I wanted to do. It did run through my mind that I always knew that I was going to get, from wearing hijab, I knew that I was going to get negative thoughts. I knew I'd get looks in the street. I knew that, you know, from my past, from being bullied and being through everything that I'd been through, I knew that I was going to get that negative take. But because that's that sense that I had when I took my shahada, I knew that it didn't matter anymore. Because for me, wearing the hijab, it was something I was doing for myself, for Allah. And it's such a blessing to be, you know, to wear a hijab, that I just thought, well, you know what, if they've got a problem with it, then it's their own problem. They can say what they want. At the end of the day, we all go in our own grave. We all have to be on our own on Judgment Day. So for me, I just turned around and said, you know what, if someone's got a problem with it, then that's their own problem. They don't need to worry about it anymore. I know that I've come home and I don't have to answer to anybody anymore. That's exactly how I looked at it. When I took my shahada, I'd never told my dad. I always told my mum and left my mum to tell my dad. And at that time, obviously, my sister was still at university. So my mum and dad, first thing my mum and dad said to me was, right, we're not telling anybody else. We're not telling your sister, we're not telling your grandparents, we're not telling your cousins, we're not telling anybody at all whatsoever. I was like, okay, fine, that's fair enough. They need time to get over it. They need time to take it in themselves. And they always didn't like things that I was doing, because I started saying to my mum, right, I can't eat what you're eating, I need to start eating halal foods. And she's like, right, okay, what's that? But they never, every time they questioned something that I was doing, I was like, look, you can't keep shouting at me, you need to just take a step back and let me explain it to you first, and just try and understand why I'm doing things. And it took probably a good 7 months before they actually took that step back and started to explain to me, letting me explain to them why I was doing things, why I had to do these certain things. They've kind of got to the point now when they've told me outright that they don't agree with what I've done. They're not happy about it. You know, all the usual typical things that parents say, you know, you're our daughter, we love you, why did you have to do this? You've made us really hurt, you've made us really upset. We've got all the family stress now because everyone's found out that I'm Muslim. You know, we have to answer to all the questions. But they've now got to the point when, because I've explained to them so much, they've now turned around and said to me, you know what, we don't agree with it, we don't like it, but there's no point shouting at you every day telling you that, because it's going to make you worse. So now they just kind of, in a nice sort of way, they just shut up and let me get on with it. in the nicest sort of sense to put it. But yeah, as I say, they just kind of let me get on with things now, because I think now they realised that when I took my Shahada, I was only 20 years, I'd only just turned 20, and they realised that I'm not a child anymore. I'm 20 years old, I'm an adult, I've got my own life, and that if this is my path in life, this is what I have to follow, then you know what, I'm not 16, I'm not 17, I'm not 18, I'm not naive, I'm 20 years old, I know my own mind, I know the decision that I've made is right and is for myself, and that's exactly how they look at it now. I mean, the rest of my family, like my sister, my aunties, my cousins, my uncles, they all found out in the worst possible way that I'd become Muslim, and they're still to this day trying to deal with it. But my mum and dad have just said, you know what, get on with your life, we'll have to answer their questions. I have told my family that if any of them have questions, then they need to ask me and not my parents. But they're all trying their best. They're all just, and I cannot thank them enough, and I can't be more grateful to them, because yeah, we still have really bad days when we just shout at each other all day and we have arguments and then we fall out, but now it's become less, and the majority now is that they let me get on with it. They understand, they've started to ask questions a bit more. I don't think they'll ever become Muslims themselves, you know, inshallah I hope they do, but I don't think they will. But they're trying to slowly understand. I mean, I went to a wedding last weekend and my dad came with me, and my dad was asking me everything, you know, who's that, is that a scholar, is that a sheikh, you know, because I went to one of these weddings where they have the spreads, you know, the spreads that they have in front of them, and he was asking why everything was on there, what everything was, and then he went, what's that book? I said, that's the Quran. He goes, oh, like the Bible? I'm like, yeah. So they are trying to understand by asking me questions, and I can't thank them enough for that. Not at all. Because they have had the worst of it, and they probably still do, but they're trying now, which means the most to me. Since I've become Muslim, for me, at the start, obviously, the relationship with my parents did get to a point when it was really bad, because we were shouting at each other every day and no one was communicating nicely or verbally or anything like that. It was quite nasty. But now, to this point today, they do ask me questions and I try to answer them the best that I can answer them. I still try to draw that line of respect with my parents. If my parents say to me, right, we need to go to church today, then I respect them by going. But if I turn around and said to them, look, I can't be with you today, I have to go to mosque, I have to do this, then they respect me. We've kind of got to that point when it's like a mutual understanding where we try and respect each other best as we can. Because as I say, like, the family have found out in the worst situation possible, and that situation's obviously still quite fresh, it's still quite new, and it's still quite in the air and everything. So we do just try and compromise and respect each other as best as we can. I mean, I do have some sisters and some brothers that turn around at me and say, you know, why are you going to the church? It's not allowed now, you're Muslim. But I'm just like, you know what? Aren't we taught to respect our families? Aren't we taught to respect our parents? And you don't know my background, you're not a revert, you're a born Muslim, and you can't always understand what we have to go through. So I know I have to respect my parents, and they know that they have to respect me. So, you know, alhamdulillah, nowadays it's sort of slowly making itself, the situation's not too bad at the moment. The only problem that we've got to this day is obviously my family, because they have only just found out. My sister's only just moved back home from university, and she's still really quite angry at me for becoming the person that I've become, and she's exactly like my parents. She just thinks, you know, all my friends are terrorists, and she thinks I'm into bad activities. But she's, you know, her and the rest of my family, they just need to learn like my parents have learned. So I hope, inshallah, that I get that blessing that I'm able to do that. I don't tell my parents about my bullying, about my suicide, because I don't want them to think it was their fault. I don't ever want them to think that me doing that was their fault and they're to blame for it. You know, I've lived with my parents my whole life, and I know their thinking, I know what exactly their concept of me. So for me, telling them about that I know exactly that they'll turn around and start blaming themselves and saying, oh, we did wrong, we were looking after your sister too much and not you. And I don't want them to, we've got enough stress at the moment with them just trying to get used to me and my way of life. So I never want to, I'm never saying never, like I probably will tell them, but for me, I don't want to do it yet because I don't want them to think it's their fault, or I don't want them to blame themselves for it. So at this moment, no, I don't want to tell them. As I say, when I took my Shahada, because it was so close to Muharram, at the time I never ever didn't really know the concept of what Muharram was. This year is what I class as my first Muharram, because this year is when I've researched into everything into such a small detail. So in my heart, yeah, Imam Hussein has definitely turned me to become Shia, but at the same time it wasn't just that, it was going to Iran as well that was my main source of becoming a Shia. That was my main decision. As soon as I come back from Iran, second I stepped off the plane, I was like, yeah, this is it now, this is Shia, that's what I'm following. But having Muharram this year and knowing the story of Imam Hussein, it's only made me love being a Shia even more. It's only made me more strong in saying, right, this is who I am. I am a Muslim and I am Shia. I'm a lover and follower that I love it, and this is exactly right. Now I know. This is my way of life from now on. This is what I follow, this is what I believe. So it has contributed a lot being able to research about Muharram this year. In a way, I wish I knew about it last year, but it was so close to taking my Shahada. I was trying to figure out everything else. So it's happened when it was meant to happen. And that love that I have is just, it's not describable. It's not. It's just an inner feeling that you have, and it's so strong that you know that what you're following is right. You know that you're so happy and so at peace with it. It is quite hard to explain, but you can see from like how happy I am just from talking about it. Going to Iran was my first ziyarat, and it was in June last year. So at the time I'd only been Muslim about 6-7 months, and I knew about the trip to Iran from the December before. I knew about it through Snowball, I knew through it about mosque, and I got told about it on several different occasions throughout the months. And I always thought, nah, not yet, no, not ready. Like, I got a little bit put off, I think, just because I was like, no, Iran, new country, like everyone's Muslim there, and I think I got a little bit put off by it. But the more and more I heard about it, and the more I found about why we were going, what was there, who I was going with, I felt like I was being called there, because every time I went to see a friend, every time I went to a mosque, it was always brought up, and I don't know why. It was just always brought up in conversation. So that's when I was like, right, I'm obviously being called to go, so I did go. Alhamdulillah, I was there for 3 weeks in Iran. And how do I describe Iran? I can't. It was just such a blessing to be there. And even though at that time I didn't, again, always have the knowledge of knowing what to do and what's going on, because about 2 weeks before I went to Iran, I'd only just completed learning my 5 daily namaz off by heart. So going to Iran was a little bit of pressure, because I knew everything else, all the other ziyarats and du'as you have to do. So it was a little bit of pressure being there, but I knew that I was being called to go there. And it was just, alhamdulillah, it was absolutely amazing. It was such a blessing to be there. It really was. My life since I've become Muslim. As you can see, I can't wrap it up into one. I'm that happy, and I'm that at peace with everything, with the way my life is going. You know, I've got a new job now, I've got new friends, I've got my religion. My religion keeps me going, and it's such a blessing, alhamdulillah, that I've come to this path, I've come to this religion, because it's so peaceful, and it just makes me so happy that this is who I am and this is my way of life. There's so little words to describe my life now since I've become a Muslim, but it's only because I'm that happy that there's no other way to describe it whatsoever. You know, I've got a new job, new friends, new contacts, and it's just a blessing, total blessing to be walking this life now.